Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa, your daily continental show here on France 24. I'm Jean-Emile Jamin. Coming up, as Russian missiles fall, African leaders meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv, aiming to share an Afrocentric perspective on finding peace. Then in Senegal, free speech activists are fearing the worst as Walf TV is ordered to stop its broadcasts. The station has been a fierce critic of government since opposition arrests earlier this year. And a crisis grows in northern Nigeria as millions are at risk of starvation. Our team heads to the ground in Borno State, where food insecurity threatens to spiral out of control. Thanks for joining us on France 24. Peace will only be achieved once Russian forces leave Ukraine. That was the stern message delivered by President Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday as he met with an African delegation on a two-day peace mission to both Kyiv and Moscow. Led by South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, the contingent of leaders expressed their urgency that the war end as soon as possible, while offering an African's perspective on finding peace.
This is indeed a historic mission in a quest for peace. And I could say that our mission really revolves around 10 key elements. The first one is that we are here to listen both to President Zelensky, and tomorrow we'll be listening to President Putin. And we do so with deep respect for the people of Ukraine, which we have expressed to President Zelensky, but also in recognition of the proposals that they have put forward as a peace formula.
Well, to recap how the day unfolded on this visit, here's France 24's correspondent in South Africa, Nadine Turon.
Members of the African Peace Mission lit commemorative candles in Bucha, Ukraine, before meeting with that country's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. While in Kyiv, the African leaders had to enter an air raid shelter as Russian missiles struck the Ukrainian capital. But the group is already off to St. Petersburg to meet with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. During a press conference following their meeting with Zelensky, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is leading the mission, says it's important to the group to hear both sides and to listen how both countries seize the road to peace in order to enter into further peace talks. Ramaphosa says that during a phone conversation with Putin, he got the impression that Russia is willing to end the war. He says he looks forward to hear how Putin sees the road to peace. He also will discuss the UN Peace Charter with the Russian president. Ramaphosa says they witnessed the devastation caused in Bucha and hopes that the International Criminal Court will investigate thoroughly. Some of the goals of the African Peace Mission are to allow the free flow of grain and for a de-escalation of conflict on both sides.
Well, to bring us up to speed about the importance and goals of this mission, I'm joined now by Professor Alex Vines, Director of the Africa Program at Chatham House. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. What hope is there that this delegation can achieve any kind of result?
It's difficult to see an immediate result. The timing of this trip, I think, is partly with an eye on the second Africa-Russia summit is in St. Petersburg next month. And so Mr. Putin in particular will be wanting to track many African leaders to St. Petersburg in the Russian Federation, and so might want in the run-up to that be sending some messaging. And of course, as you've mentioned, the unimpeded access to grain, particularly from Ukraine and Russia, is really important for African nations for their food security. So these are really important issues that I think that the seven-member Africa delegation is looking for with its trip to Kyiv today and to St. Petersburg tomorrow.
Now, where does Africa find itself in terms of its place in this tug of war, this diplomatic tug of war we're seeing between East and West? Why is Africa so important?
Well, it's a numbers game. I mean, the United Nations recognizes 55 African states. And so that's a large number of potential votes in the UN General Assembly and in other fora. And many African countries see what's going on in Ukraine as a distant European war, and they want a non-aligned position on this, but they are being impacted. There's high inflation, the disruption of supply chains, particularly grain that I've just mentioned, is really significant. And so they do want a cessation of hostilities. Hence this 7-person delegation to Kyiv today and St. Petersburg tomorrow, led by the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Now, we've heard those quotes going back to them about what was said today. Zelensky saying only if Russia leaves can peace be found. Ramaphosa saying that international investigations into Bucha should be continued. What stood out for you?
Well, look, the African Initiative peace plan, I haven't seen the full details, but the leaked version did reassure everybody that the African proposal is that the Russians need to retreat back to recognize international borders. And so that there was some concern about that. In exchange, the Africans are asking for suspension of sanctions, and particularly also the ICC indictment, the International Criminal Court indictment that has been put on Mr. Putin. So these are kind of issues that are kind of important to understand. The timing, as I say, I think is to do with the run-up to the summit in St. Petersburg next month, the second Russia-Africa summit. But the timing's poor in that the Ukrainians have just started their second offensive, and I don't think we'll be in any mood for compromise conversation just at the moment.
We'll see how that goes in terms of that summit. That's Professor Alex Vines, the director of the Africa program at Chatham House. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24. Some news from Mali on Friday. The country's military authority have asked the United Nations to withdraw its peacekeeping force known as MINUSMA. The decision marks a major turning point, with MINUSMA set up in 2013 following a Tuareg rebellion and jihadist insurgencies. But frustrations over growing insecurity have spurred 2 recent coups in Mali, with the current ruling junta increasingly at odds with MINUSMA, resulting in this call. In Senegal, worries are growing around freedom of speech. Broadcasts from the channel Walf TV have been suspended for a month following violent clashes that rocked the country. Government accused the private station of broadcasting hate speech and threatening public order, a claim dismissed by the channel itself and many independent observers.
Actuellement, il y a personne. Il y a personne, vous voyez.
The Walf TV headquarters are quieter than usual. No surprise given that the government has blocked the channel from broadcasting for weeks now. Staff will remain temporarily redundant until the 1-month ban is complete. Mustafa Diop, the director, says he still doesn't understand why the channel was sanctioned.
They accuse us of using deceitful, subversive language, but also of broadcasting images of protests that depicted minors. But the program that was shown that day was the same program that we have here behind us. It's a program which is broadcast on the radio. There are no images involved whatsoever. We're extremely surprised. We don't understand this decision from the Senegalese government at all.
Following the ban, members of the public banded together to support the channel and the journalists working there. Adama is among those who came to the offices in person to make a cash contribution.
I am an unconditional supporter of Walf TV. The suspension of the channel is unfair and doesn't sit right. Before getting to this point, there should have been some sort of dialogue.
At a press conference on Thursday, the government explained their reasoning.
It's because of a report by their correspondent in Ziguinchor on the 1st of June, which claimed that the army was deployed in the streets of the city to shoot at protesters. The need to maintain public order, national security, and territorial integrity justifies the measures that were taken, in accordance with the law, to re-establish the peace.
Senegal dropped 31 places during the recent World Press Freedom rankings published by Reporters Without Borders. The NGO noted a rise in verbal, physical and legal threats against journalists in the country in recent years.
Finally, a huge humanitarian issue is erupting in northern Nigeria. According to figures from the World Food Programme, 4.3 million people in Borno, Adamawa and Yobe states are at risk of serious famine. Chronic food insecurity linked to regional Islamist insurgencies is preventing many people from growing what they need to earn an income. Our team in Nigeria went to Monguno in Borno State, a town afflicted by this suffering.
Here at this distribution point in Monguno, Inan Ibrahim collects food aid because of the insecurity caused by the Islamic State group in West Africa, also known as ISWAP. She and her husband have fled their hometown to save the lives of their 7 children. Inan convinced her husband to abandon his field overnight.
After the insurgency, we ran to the bush. We hid in there, and then we trekked down to Monguno, where we lived for 13 days before being displaced to Tsabar Mari, close to Maiduguri.
ISWAP is a constant threat around Lake Chad. Nearly 100,000 people are internally displaced. They survive here in Monguno, protected by the Nigerian army. The number of new arrivals continue to rise. Thousands of farmers, herders and fishermen are out of work, plunged into extreme poverty with their families.
For us as the frontliners, the situation, to be sincere, is becoming alarming. Because, for example, this registration that we are doing here, there are registration of new arrivals from September or August or September last year to this present moment.
Children are the first victims of 14 years of armed conflict in Borno State. In Maiduguri, the Mona Clinic treats children under 5 suffering from acute malnutrition. Their recovery rate is close to 100% thanks to this therapeutic food treatment. But training mothers is essential.
The ready-to-use therapeutic food is not just enough to make them change. You need to put more effort in the way you communicate to them, the way you sit with them, the way you talk to them, the way you advise them, how you make them bring their babies, how you make them take the food.
The need for aid in the region is critical. According to World Food Programme, malnutrition could affect 4.3 million people in northeastern Nigeria by next August.
Well, that's all the news from across the continent. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for keeping an eye on Africa. We'll see you soon.